I'm sorry. I'm looking at Eastern time here. You're lucky you guys get out early tonight. I'm going to be here till 10:30. Okay, let's start the meeting. It's 6:30 and I think, is everyone here is Chris here right now too?
I am.
Okay, good. So all board members are present for this meeting. For a regular board meeting for March 24th, April 24th, 28th, April 28th. So call the meeting to order and let's set the meeting agenda. Are there any changes, additions, or corrections to the agenda?
No, Mr. President, not that I'm aware of.
Okay, then need a motion to accept the agenda as is.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, Jackie made the motion. A second then?
I'll second that.
And that's Doug seconded. Bobby, you want to do a roll call vote, please?
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Loaf,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Baki.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. Next item is the consent agenda. We have two items on the consent agenda, both board meeting minutes from March 10th and March 24th. Are there any additions or corrections? If hearing none, then I need a motion to accept the consent agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Doug. A second.
Second.
Thank you, Jackie. Bobby, would you please do a roll call vote?
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Loaf,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Baki.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the public open forum. I declare the public forum open, and are there any guests that would like to address the board? Okay, hearing none, then I'll close the public forum and we'll move on to the public hearing. We have a public hearing tonight on one of our larger projects, the CR50 Iron Enhanced Sand Filter Project. And I'll open the public hearing then. Mike?
Yeah, Mr. President, managers, we have Kyle Crawford here from EOR to give a short summary of the project and then take any questions from the public or board members or others. And then after we can close, we'll later on have an item on the new business to cover the ordering and diversion petition separately. Go ahead, Kyle, please.
Good evening, Mr. President, managers. I'll just bring up a few slides here quick just to cover the presentation. All right, can you see the slides here?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
So as I mentioned, or as Administrator Kinney mentioned, I'm just going to do a brief overview for the public hearing, and then later on in the agenda for the project ordering, I will do a more in-depth presentation regarding the project. So this is the County Road 50 Iron Enhanced Sand Filter Project on Washington Judicial Ditch number 6. The district was awarded a Clean Water Fund grant in the amount of $750,000 or just under $750,000 in the fiscal year 2020. The project itself is located along County Road 50, just south of Forest Lake. It is directly adjacent to Washington Judicial Ditch 6, which the watershed district is the drainage authority on, and that is why we are having the public hearing for impacts to that judicial ditch system as well. On the left there, you can see the project location indicated in red. 202nd Street North is also County Road 50 there. So the project, we will be pulling water from Judicial Ditch 6. In the bottom right photo there, you can see a photo of the ditch. We will be pulling water from that and pumping it into a set of iron enhanced sand filter basins here. You can see our feasibility concept here. Oh. So the Judicial Ditch 6 here is on the left side of your screen. It goes north, south to north, and then ends up kind of doing a brief jog before entering a culvert under County Road 50. And then it continues about a mile north and enters the third lake of Forest Lake. So this project, we're proposing to pump water from that stream into this lift station, and then we would alternate pumping into 2 parallel iron enhanced sand filter beds. As we're currently looking, we're looking to alternate that pumping roughly every 24 hours. The research that we've seen is that iron enhanced sand is much more efficient in removing phosphorus when it has time to dry out completely. With that said, we will have the ability long-term within our pump station where district staff can adjust that interval based on what our monitoring will be looking like in the field. So as I mentioned, we do have impacts on Washington Judicial Ditch 6. If you recall, at the April 14th board meeting, EOR had completed a drainage report with the findings that we will not be reducing the drainage capacity of that ditch, which is an important thing to note as the watershed, as the drainage authority of that ditch needs to ensure that there's not any reduction of drainage capacity within that ditch. Construction costs. So currently we are looking at approximately $1,030,000 to $1.2 million for overall construction costs. One thing to note, these do include a 20% contingency factor. Just given we are only at feasibility design, we need to ensure we're still accounting for additional costs that some obviously unknowns as we're working through design. Currently that is we are looking at about a $650 per pound of phosphorus removed when we're looking at the overall lifespan of the project. For reference, typically anything under $1,000 per pound is considered a worthwhile cost benefit project. So the project itself, we're anticipating a reduction of total phosphorus of 87 pounds due to this practice. That'd be 87 pounds per year. Within our grant agreement, we had originally targeted 85 pounds, so we are currently exceeding that target. There are additional removals of orthophosphate and total suspended solids as well, as you can see in that table. In addition to that, we do have additional returns anticipated per the Minnesota Stormwater Manual for iron enhanced sand filters of nitrogen, heavy metals, bacteria, total suspended solids, and hydrocarbons. And then just a quick note on utilities and kind of the configuration of the project. So the photo on the left side would be, we're on the south side of County Road 50 looking east. The filter basins and pump infrastructure would be kind of in our top right corner as we're looking there. You can see where JD6 ends up going into the culvert underneath the county road. Currently, as part of this project, we're not anticipating to have any impacts on that culvert itself. There are a number of utilities that are running through this right-of-way corridor. You can see telephone cable, electric, gas line. As part of that, our outlet pipe will actually be bored directly underneath County Road 50 back into that judicial ditch. We are boring that deep enough so we'll be avoiding all existing utilities. The photo in the middle is actually, you can kind of see vaguely in the middle there, kind of where my cursor is. That's actually a historic drain tile that was put in approximately 100 years ago when the ditch was originally built. So as part of that, we are locating our project pump intake so that we can pull flows that would be coming out of that historic drain tile as well, and to ensure we're getting full treatment of flows before they go further downstream. So for the schedule here, assuming the district decides to move forward with the project tonight, we're looking at moving forward on final design and specifications with the goal of putting this project out to bid in early June. That'd be targeting the first board meeting in June for bringing this project back to the board and requesting authorization to bid the project. That project would then be bid for public bidding by contractors throughout the month of June. And then in the first board meeting of July, we'd be targeting to, assuming favorable bids, bring the project again back to the board with a recommendation to award the project. With that schedule, would be looking then going through contracting, submittal reviews with a fall construction schedule of likely early October going into November. A lot of that is going to be based on material lead times. With everything going on, there are certainly material delays going on. However, we've been spending a lot of time talking to contractors and suppliers to ensure that we can get all the materials necessary to build the project either this fall, or we may have some components that will carry over into the spring construction. So the way we're currently laying it out, fall construction would consist of overall project excavation and earthwork, installation of the iron sand filter, installation of all the piping and the structures, and then button everything up for the winter, and then come back in the spring, and that would be installing electrical, control panel, the pumps themselves, final restoration, and hooking everything up and ensuring that everything's working and troubleshooting any final issues before we turn it on for the 2023 growing season for treatment. So with that, I can open it up for any questions from the board, or as Administrator Kinney mentioned, I can also respond to any questions later during the project ordering agenda item as well.
Thank you, Kyle. Are there any questions from the public? I'll ask again, are there any questions or concerns from the public? Hearing none, then I'm going to.
Excuse me, I do have a question. My name is Scott Dobozinski, and I own property right off 202nd. I've worked with Blaine a bit on some of the failing tile from Judicial District 6, for some of the historic tile, and I wonder about the drainage capacity and the fact that you can't reduce the capacity of the drainage. I wonder how these pumps will actually affect drainage tile in Judicial Ditch 6 that, over the years has been serviced through maintenance or, different effects like that, because it is on my property, I'm experiencing sinkholes and different sorts of stuff. So I'm just kind of curious what you think of the impact from that perspective.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So the way we're designing this is that we will be pulling water from the stream, but we're not going to be draining any part of the ditch or draining further upstream. There will be a low water shutoff on both the pumps within the lift station to ensure that we're not actually draining any part of the stream. So as part of this ditch system, it is all considered wetland. So we are limited in how low we can actually pump that. So we can't actually pull all the water to actually drain so that the ditch would never actually run dry due to our pumps. So it will, in the immediate area of our project, there'd be lower water when there's significant water in the ditch, but when during low water periods, there'd likely be no change as we would not be able to pump at that point.
Thank you, Kyle. Scott, does that answer your question?
Yes, I just, I mean, generally speaking, it does. I just don't, knowing that I have 2 active sinkholes now, and over the course of the last 3 decades, it's been repaired 4 times. So I just wonder if, as you pump, during that pumping, if the actual water is going to be flowing per se faster when it's being pumped in a 24-hour period, if that's going to have any effect on tile that's already failing, if it's going to create more sediment to go, or in that, and that we've maybe determined that this part of Judicial List 6 actually flows under a new shed and potentially a septic system that I've had put in the last 1.5 years. And they were not identified at that time. So that's my larger concern, is if it's going to affect any of those structures as they are now, based on, just the fact that you're going to be pumping. Not saying it's a bad thing. I just need to know from a standpoint of if it affects mine, my property, how it will, and who to notify when it occurs.
Yeah, as I mentioned, the way we're designing it, and obviously we're still in the feasibility stage here, and we'll have more things to investigate as we move into final design. But the way we're designing the system is that it'll essentially only be pumping the water that is available in the ditch in this immediate vicinity. So in terms of upstream impacts, they'll likely be fairly minor.
Okay.
Is there
Yeah.
any other follow-up we have to do on this, Kyle? Or has it been researched enough?
Mr. President, managers, I can also let you know that Scott, this is Mike Kinney, District Administrator. I know Blaine, you've probably talked with and met with him. I've been out to the property as well. So we've also have tried to help facilitate a better understanding of what's going on in that system. EOR has been out there several times also to look at these drainage systems that where the pathways are unknown, of course, because when it's tile, you can't necessarily see it. And we attempted to contract with a firm, and Blaine was out there and trying to scope out from the Highway 50, because there is a tile line that comes out basically at the road intersection of this channel area and County Road 50. So, and it goes southwest somewhere, but we have no idea. And I can't remember. I think at one time, I think they just showed up and they said they couldn't do it, I think, if I recall. And then, so we attempted to get another firm, I think locally, and I can't remember what the result of that was.
It was actually, I can fill in a little bit.
That was Olson's.
I was out there as well, yeah. So they were able to televise short stretches of it from the available surface intakes, but due to sediment, tree ribs, etc., they were not able to televise the full length of it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I can add to that as well. In general, it was found to be in relatively poor condition. several collapses within the pipeline itself, or the drain tile, I should say.
Okay, if there are no other questions, I think, is there anyone else in the public that would like to ask any questions besides Scott? If not, then I'm going to declare the hearing closed, and we'll move on then to the next item on the agenda, the Citizen Advisory Committee update.
Mr. President, managers, Aiden Reed is available this evening to give an update. A nice meeting. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. President, managers. I've provided my meeting notes of the Tuesday, April 19th Citizens Advisory Committee for you to review. In the interest of time, I can just simply stand for questions related to those materials. Although I will point out one item. There was a board request that I inquired to the CAC about their thoughts on the State of the Watershed event and whether that event should be held in person, or, you know, kind of the sense of any other thoughts around that event. This request was in January, and we haven't met for the months of February and March. So this is the first we're getting to it. It's a somewhat dated request, but the CAC was very much in favor of holding that event. They also noted that that event should be held at a time when it's possible to do an in-person event. The consensus was generally that the benefit of that in-person interaction, as well as kind of the energy from when that event was held in the past, would make it, we should just wait until whenever it's possible to have an in-person, or an in-person event, I should say. Any other
Okay, thank you.
questions about the notes?
Okay, if just one question, Mike, if we're going to move ahead on this, we'll have to start planning something for this year. That's something we'll have to probably put on our to-do list. Or maybe you've already have started some thoughts on that.
Well, I was in attendance with the meeting, and it was Aiden did a great job with this last meeting, and we have not only our new CAC member, but we had another, he was able to recruit another citizen to join, and it looks like maybe we'll have hit somebody else. But overall, in September, we've hosted a tour of some kind and over the anniversary period. But I think that if we're going to do a State of the Watershed event, as described, we probably would like to do it separately, and maybe, during still the summer, if August would be a good time. Last time we picked the end of April for different reasons, but mostly just not to compete with summer activities. But this might be a year of an exception, I guess. We have a lot of good things to tell the public.
So is this something the board should discuss later on, or maybe at the next meeting?
Yes, I was just going to say I can put it on our summary of board direction for staff to discuss, and then bring it back for further discussion.
One
Put
of
it
the
on.
interesting things that's happened at the Forest Lake Association meeting this year, we had about 140 people there, which was less than what we had 2 years ago. And I think a lot of people had decided to, of course, it was a bad night also weather-wise, which didn't help any, but a lot of people watched on Zoom. So, we may have to offer that as a secondary backup system, because it seems like people have been identifying with that kind of medium and seem to like it. So something we probably should consider as we plan our event. Okay, so then we'll look at that maybe at the next meeting. So let's move on. Any other questions for Aiden? If not, good job, Aiden. Thank you for your leadership in this effort. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Next item is the aquatic invasive species update. Garrett Miller. Garrett, you want to?
Hello, Mr. President and managers. Sure. So I think my March AIS plan for 2022 covered most of it, but maybe a quick few updates just to bring everybody up to speed as we start to really ramp up for the open water season here. We shut off the aerators at the end of March, March 29th. Oxygen levels looked really good for the entire winter, and we actually just finished up retrieving all those thin ice signs today, despite the nasty winds and cold. But we got those in and into storage. Curlew Pondweed, which is obviously coming up in the agenda here. We're gearing up for that. Steve McComas was out last week on Comfort Lake, didn't find enough to warrant a treatment. So that continues to be a theme on that lake, and expressed that he will be out either tomorrow or early next week sometime to begin those other lakes. Looking forward to seeing what his results are. Performing lake monitoring on Shields. It looks like we might have a decent treatment on that lake, but really curious about Forest and seeing where that comes out. Again, another item that's coming up later in the agenda is Shields Lake Carp, which we're planning to potentially do a electrofishing at mid-May. I know I've been kind of hesitant to suggest another in-lake removal, just given maybe the less than expected results in 2019, but WSB reached out to me very recently, in fact, and quoted us a price that justifies trying another attempt to protect that large investment of the Allen treatment. So we're looking to do that here soon. From their expertise and experiences doing this all across the metro, they said that springtime is usually when they see the most success. And just as a reminder, in 2019, we tried in the fall. So we'll see how things go with that. And that proposal, again, later in the agenda, won't take too much time, is up to potentially 3 electrofishing attempts. Based on the first one, we'll assess, see what the results are. And if we're happy with those results, then we can continue and do a second and third, potentially. And then the last bit of information I'll keep everybody up to date on is the watercraft inspection program. So again, we made some changes to the compensation just to be competitive in this job market. I mean, everywhere you drive, people are hiring. So to try and stick out, we raised our base pay, added some incentives such as bonuses based off of how many hours you work, holiday pay, and if you're a returning inspector, there's kind of a pay scale. And I really do think because of those reasons or those changes that we have been getting a fair amount of applications in, and as of right now have hired 6 inspectors and are planning to send out a 7th offer letter here shortly. Again, we can hire, or we have the equipment to support about 8 inspectors in-house. So very happy that we have basically a full team. The game plan is to get as many of those onboarded as possible by the May 14th fishing opener, but we're dealing with a lot of different individuals who might be still in school for college and whatnot. So they might be starting later, but at least a few we want out on some of those busier accesses. So I can take any questions, but that's kind of where we're at with that program.
Hey, any questions for Garrett?
One question, Garrett. On Moody, have you heard anything more about that fish survey from the DNR?
I need to follow up them again, but every time I have, they're just like, it's on our list. We're going to get to it when we can. And they just haven't been able to give me much more information than that. Kind of seemed from my phone call with, I'm forgetting their name, but they seemed a little short-staffed, and I will definitely follow up though, because we are due for one.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for Garrett.
Yes, Dave, go ahead.
Garrett, I posted the Turf Talk session on the Bone Lake Association webpage. Maybe this is a little off topic, but I assume there won't be other sessions offered other than those in Forest Lake. Is that true?
Well, that's a great question. I believe Jessica reached out with that information.
That's
So-
correct. That's correct. There's just the 2 at this time.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Mhm.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, if not, Garrett, thank you again for a good update. Thank you.
Thank you.
moving on then to new business, got a number of items here. The first one is permit 22-006 detail shop parking lot.
Yep, thanks, Mr. President and managers. Bobby, if you could scroll to the figure associated with that permit. So, yep, so we got a detail shop in Forest Lake. This is, you know, where the Target is. It's kind of a little bit southwest of there off of 15th Street. Yeah, if we can scroll to the figure, which should be after the report. This is an after the fact permit. The property owner had an existing gravel parking lot, and they went in and paved that and also expanded the footprint of the parking lot. So they had done that without proper watershed and city approvals. So after finding out about that, we informed them that they needed a permit and they needed to address stormwater management for the site. They're proposing kind of a shallow wetland treatment system. There's very little grade between the parking lot and the wetland, so options are pretty limited, but they were able to squeeze a feature in there that meets the district's water quality and rate control requirements. And then they'll have some erosion control, some silt fence, and then they're gonna put blankets all around it, being that it's right next to the wetland there. It's hard to squeeze perimeter control in. So I'm recommending approval with the conditions in the report. I'm waiting on a construction cost for the stormwater facilities because that's what we base the financial assurance on for the stormwater piece. And then kind of our standard maintenance agreements and those financial assurances. So unless there's any questions, I'm recommending approval with those conditions.
I have one question.
Sure.
Jackie, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to inquire if we know where the wastewater is going to be landing from this detailed business. It's going to be done in-house, is what I understand, or in the building. So they
Yep.
shouldn't have any washing going on outside, but are we certain, or did you check after the driveway was already put in that there's proper drainage to the to the wastewater system or wherever else it's going? It can't be just drained out onto the driveway.
I have not asked that question. I surely can inquire about that if the board would like to add that as a pending item.
Yeah,
Anything
I
that,
would be very suspicious, especially someone who didn't get the proper permits to begin with, that there might be something else that's hidden that we don't want to find out about after they're in operation. So
sure,
I would like to add that as a stipulation that we investigate the wastewater handling for that business.
okay,
And with that add, I'll make the motion to approve with those 5 now conditions.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. We need a second.
Actually, that'd be number 6. I'm sorry. That would be number 6, I guess.
I will second that motion, and I do have a follow-up question.
Yes, thank you, Dave. Go ahead.
Since this was an after the fact permit, Greg, is there any kind of penalty that they have to pay for not having it to begin with?
the district does not have any penalties for after the fact, but I will say that having to come in and do this as a separate project surely has added costs to the building owner. It would have been much easier to do it as part of their original project, and squeezing this in after the fact, I'm sure, has created more work and costs for them. But currently the district does not have any penalties for after the fact permits. If that's something the board wants to consider, they could take that up. I know some municipalities charge like double the permit fee or something like that. our permit fees are really just a reimbursement of our costs, so something that have to be thought about if that's something the district wants to enforce. And we probably have to defer to legal counsel on what we could or could not do.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead, Dave.
this is Chuck.
Oh, Chuck, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Two notes. First, on that question, the watershed districts do not have statutory authority to impose penalties, and do just have the authority to require payment of fees and costs actually incurred. So it's really for an after the fact permit, it's really, as Greg suggests, just a matter that there's a disincentive based on the additional costs that the permittee will incur, presuming they do come in and get their after the fact permit. Otherwise, we can certainly enforce the fact that they did not get a permit and don't have proper measures in place. And then also, just as to Manager Anderson's question, the discharge of wastewater into the storm sewer system would be illegal, and the city of Forest Lake, under its own MPCA permit for its storm sewer system, is obligated to have in its code some provisions that allow it to enforce against anybody who's discharging non-stormwater into the stormwater system. So in checking into that, it would make sense to coordinate with the city in some way, or just make sure they've taken a look at it.
I'm actually meeting with the city tomorrow, so I can mention that to them and see if they can include that as or check into that for us as well.
Yeah, the EPA may also get involved inside the building because they have to protect the workers. And, with wet or dry sanding, all those fumes and the paint booths are very well controlled. So that's another area. The city could probably explain that too and make sure that was covered, but they should be very active in an operation like that also. So should be a lot of monitoring going on. So any other questions?
Mr. President, I have one.
Yes, Chris.
I'm assuming that the ultimate responsibility is the building owner, but is the contractor who did the resurfacing a local one? And is it worth, I'm sure they understand now, but is there anything that can be done to at least have them inform their future potential clients that permit process might be something they will want to consider before actually proceeding with the project? I don't know, it seems kind of obvious, but just a thought / question.
Mr. President, managers, I'll just note that this is a common problem that we run into, and I think Manager Anderson and I've talked about it even through the MOD organization about how do you potentially, right, you think it would be the contractor, the first thing that they would ask any owner about doing work, excavating, depositing materials, doing construction, would ask, have you obtained the necessary permits? But it's unfortunately there seemingly is no disincentive for them to not ask. So they proceed, and we often are then dealing with the homeowner, which ultimately I guess you could say is responsible, but you think it would also be a responsible contractor that would suggest that just that to inquire, so they're not then having to negotiate with the owner, removing material and other things, which has occurred particularly in wetland fills over the years. It's costing somebody. It's certainly a waste and an unfortunate element, but we're currently dealing with another such problem in the district.
Just curious. Go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
To say it's within the city of Forest Lake, but that doesn't it happens throughout the district.
Just curious how the watershed was notified of this. Was it a citizen or, how do you come across something like this?
I believe on this one, there was a wetland violation that was noted in the area. And through that process, the city being the LGU for WACA, I believe they identified that they had redone the parking lot without proper approvals. I don't know if Mike, if you have any further information on that, that's my recollection.
Mine as well, right? So how they, right, who did the, if it happened to be a city or somebody noting that there was some activity there, unknown to us, but I regularly instruct staff to, even if you're not in permitting, if you see activity, we should check with the LGUs to see if the activity is permitted. Because again, our permitting program is to help people have a successful project, not be penalizing. But if we come across something where somebody's doing an activity, then we will work with our partners to correct it.
Okay, any other questions? We have a motion and a second on the floor. So if no other questions, we can proceed to vote. Are there any other questions? Okay, if not, Bobby, would you please do a roll call vote, please?
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Baki.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Next topic is the 2021 audit report and presentation and approval.
Just President
Or
Managers.
acceptance, I'm sorry.
Correct. So the audit report is completed. And so the auditors just sent us a little video presentation to summarize it, but both the president and treasurer and myself met with the audit team and our accountant, and we can take any additional questions that you might have.
Are we going to run that video, Mike?
Yes.
Okay.
Welcome to the 2021 financial statement audit presentation for the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District. My name is Justin Nelson. I will be walking through a short slideshow presentation to go over the financial results and our audit opinion for the Comfort Lake Watershed District. I'd like to just start by saying thank you to the Watershed District Board of Managers for having us as your audit firm. And I also like to say thank you to everybody on the staff of Comfort Lake Watershed District for all their help preparing things for the audit. We really appreciate your help and couldn't have done it without you. So we will start with the audit results for 2021. So we are going to go over first our audit opinion on the financial statements and related internal controls. We are issuing an unmodified clean audit opinion, which is the audit opinion that the Watershed District is striving for in 2021. So how we arrived at that result is we tested a number of transactions around paying bills, paying employees, looking at grant recognition and agreements. We also looked at what the Board of Managers is getting to make decisions and the internal controls that surround all those related processes. So I'm happy to report in 2021 that we have no internal control audit findings. We have had a couple in the prior years that have been corrected, so I think it really signifies positive progress and results over 2021, having no internal control findings related to any of the processes that we tested. As part of our audit, we are also required to test Minnesota legal compliance and state statutes. I would like to just point out just a couple of those state statutes that we do test for watershed districts. One of them would be timely paying paying of bills or claims within 35 days, and another would be conflicts of interest with any of the Board of Managers. So we did note no municipal legal compliance findings in 2021, and again, no audit findings overall for the watershed district, which again is a really positive thing. All right, the first financial reporting slide that we're going to go through is the general fund balance as it compares to the future year's budget. So we do have a chart here that shows the past 5 years offset by 1 year, comparing the general fund reserves to the future year's budget. So we do see a kind of a trend in both the total general fund balance and the budget kind of in competing directions. So we do see the general fund budget increasing from about 200,000 in 2018 up to about 450,000 in 2022. So we also see kind of a trend in the general fund balance dropping from about 86% of future expenditures down to 7% in 2020. So as part of our audit, we met with the managers and staff just with some of the downward trend in the general fund and looking at the reserve level. And it was approved that the the watershed district did make a transfer of about $330,000 from the project program fund to the general fund, kind of to get it to a benchmark as agreed to, about 50% for this audit. So that was approved, and that's kind of the big activity in the general fund this year, to kind of get the reserve levels back to a manageable point of about 50%. So I think just something to consider in future years to ensure that the resources in the general fund are sufficient to cover those expenditures in that rising budget over the prior few years. How we got there a little bit is, again, we look at the general fund budget to actual. So this is just focusing on 2021 revenues, expenditures, and other financing sources and uses. So, the general fund did end up increasing about $200,000, and the overall budget did kind of outline an expectation that it was going to drop about 160,000. So I think overall a positive result for the general fund. Revenues were really close to what was budgeted. No real no significant variance in the general fund revenues. They were all very, very close to what was budgeted. So as well as the expenditures, the largest positive expenditure variance in the general fund related to manager per diems, about $23,000 of a positive variance, offset slightly by some things in the accounting department of about $14,000. So overall, a really positive year for the fund. Good managing of expenditures, and again, it came in a little bit more favorable. And when we consider that transfer in that we talked about on the previous slide, we do have the fund balance of about $227,000 at the end of the year, which again, if you go back to that prior slide, is a 50% of the future year's expenditures. So the final financial piece for the watershed district would be the program and project implementation fund. So we look at that as the budget to actual statement for 2021 as well. So we do have obviously revenues and expenditures, but we also do have kind of some of the loan proceeds that the watershed district did receive in budget for in 2021. So we'll start with revenues, which were under budget by about $815,000. So we do have a note at the bottom noting that the largest variance related to grant revenue, which is about $780,000 there. So we also have a note stating that grant revenues are only recognized as expenditures for grants are incurred. So that's when the grants are earned. So basically the note there obviously would be that there was maybe some expectations that some of the grants would have been spent further since they were approved or received and whatnot. But again, they would relate to any of the expenditures. So as we go down to the expenditures and we look at the project costs as well, we do note that the expenditures were also under budget by about $800,000 there. So again, the biggest reason and the note that we have below there is related to the individual lake projects, and obviously some of those things tied to the grants. And again, the individual lake projects were under budget by about $900,000 there. So that is the biggest reason for that. So when you look at things, that is the reason for kind of the overall variance there in the revenues and expenditures. So again, as I mentioned earlier, there is another financing source and use of loan proceeds that the watershed district did apply for and get of about $850,000. And we noted earlier in the presentation that there was an approval of a transfer out to the general fund of about $330,000. So we all said and done, the net change in fund balance was about $100,000. And the fund does have about $1 million of resources available for the future years to pay for some of those future projects, as well as, again, some unearned revenue in the future for some of those grants that haven't been spent. So overall, a pretty good year for the program and project implementation fund overall. Again, the last slide is just our contact information. So if anybody has any questions or would like to reach out to us, you can see our information and feel free to do so. Obviously, we're doing things via presentation and video. So if you have any questions or if there's anything you'd like to hear more about, feel free to reach out to one of us. We'd be happy to talk to you via phone call or in person or via meeting. So again, thank you everybody for your help in the process. Another successful year. And good luck in 2022. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions?
Mr. President, I have a question.
Yes, I can't. Who is that, Doug?
This is
Or Dave?
Manager
Dave,
Baki.
okay.
What is the process for paying bills that keeps us in compliance with internal controls?
The fundamental piece is that we're obligated to pay the bills within 35 days. So as things come in, staff will process all the invoices and bills that are due and send them off to create an accounts payable that then submitted to our accountant staff. And from there, you'll see later on in the meeting, the board will approve the bills to be paid. And that's the simplistic summary of compliance, is that we need to be within that time frame. They'll go through and just randomly select any myriad of things that are listed in our monthly accounts payable and ask for copies of the receipts and when did what are the dates on those and things to make sure we're in compliance. There are some other elements that they've talked about with timing of grant revenues. There's been another one that they, because of a change in the general accounting standards a few years back, the way we considered it unearned revenue was 1 year. Another year where we had a finding was we did not have in hand an agreement with the bank to exceed the $250,000 federal insurance limits. We had even just 1 day, and that's all it was. We bumped over it by $5,000 or $6,000, and that was an exceedance. That was a finding. So there are things like that that they review, basically 100% of our bank statements, but then they'll just ask us to pull different things, and they want copies of the original receipt. If it's a $5 item from Home Depot or Menards, we have to have the receipt for it.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Who signs the checks and who oversees that process?
So monthly, like later this evening, we'll have a conversation, and in fact, we can offer to you, Manager Baki, the opportunity to come in on Friday to sign checks, because Manager Schmaltz is out of town and we need another board member to sign checks. So normally we'll have the president and the treasurer do that. But in this particular case, we will be looking for another board member to come in and sign the checks. And then we can offer to also have the list of all the accounts payable items, and you can look at them in more detail. And of course, any manager can ask to review the full details of all of our expenditures and the supporting document for any of those items.
Thank you for the invitation, but I think it should be the assistant treasurer who signs on Friday.
And I'm
Well,
available.
or you could argue that since the president is absent, maybe the vice president would want to go in, but I'll leave that up to the managers.
Thank you for the answers. That's very helpful.
Hey, any other questions? If
I'll
not, we
make the
need a,
motion. I'll make the motion to accept the treasurer's, or excuse me, the audit report as presented.
thank you, Jackie. Second, please.
I'll second that.
Okay. It's been made and seconded. Bobby, would you please do a roll call vote?
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Baki.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries and passes. So let's move on to the next item. Forest Lake Curly Leaf Pondweed Treatment Contract. We need to authorize that.
Yes, Mr. President, managers, and again, Garrett is here to answer any questions as well, but since the dollar amount is in excess of my authority for approval, it needs to come to the board.
Garrett?
Well, if nobody else is going to do it, I will make the motion to enter into the contract with Forest Lake and the Lake Association as well, not to exceed 35,000, our portion.
Get another managers? I'll second that myself then. Bobby, please do a roll call vote.
Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Baki.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next item is the CR 50 Iron Enhanced Study Filter Project. Is there additional information or any additional questions we want to cover?
I have one.
Yeah,
And it
Manager
ha-
Anderson, go ahead.
Yep, it has to do with the cost breakdown. And I know we've got staff here that maybe we can talk about in this project. The total amount is $934,250. I think that was in the previous document for the public hearing. The Clean Water Fund grant is $747,400, leaving $186,850. And that is to be covered by the 319 EPA Small Watershed Grant, but there wasn't a dollar amount attached to that grant. So I'm wondering if the balance is covered in whole by that 319 grant, or is there some that has to come out of the general fund? Or was it budgeted as part of this project through the tax levy that came in for projects?
Mr. President, managers, it's the latter. So we were not, the awarding of this 319 Small Watershed Grant was just earlier this year, made available to us.
Mhm.
Emily had been, in particular, been working with MPCA. Well, her and myself have been, and UR had been working with them on this application for the last couple of years. However, due to the, I guess, excellent submission quality that was provided by Emily and others, there was no additional comment from the EPA on the request. According to the MPCA, it's the first time that that's happened. So rather, otherwise we would have anticipated probably this fall, but we have the grant in hand, so we can utilize that those grant funds for this project.
And how much was that, Mike?
I think it's 250,000 over 4 years.
Okay.
I think is that correct, Emily?
292,000.
292, right? Okay, thank you.
So would we use that to replenish funds? Is that to, we have to divide it up over 4 years? No? How does that work?
Not necessarily. We can spend it, and we probably will spend it pretty much immediately on these between tax forfeit and County Road 50. We could spend it pretty quickly, but the idea is we wouldn't get another installment for another 4 years.
Okay,
Any other questions? I just had one. I thought I recall that the pumping station in that one photograph was really fairly close to the culvert as well as to County Road 50. Are there any issues with that equipment being exposed where there might be a chance of vandalism or damage of some type from salt or other things that would be next to the road or where people could get at it? I know we were concerned about our one piece of equipment we had next to the Highway 97. We had a fence around it to protect it. Is there any possible issue there of damage or vandalism?
That's an excellent question, Mr. President, managers. The pump station itself will be about 50 feet off the edge of the road. In addition, it will be underground. So essentially what you'll see will be a large access latch, which you can put a padlock on, which I would recommend. And the control cabinet as well would be padlocked.
Okay. Good, thank you. Any other questions? If not, then we need a motion to accept the resolution 2204-02.
Mr. President, managers, I think there's two. All right, go ahead. Yep.
That's the right one, isn't it, Mike? I think it's what I have in my file. Yeah, okay.
Yes, yep, you're right.
I will make that motion.
Thank you, Manager Anderson. Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Thank you, Doug. So we have a motion and a second. Bobby, please do a roll call vote.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Baki.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. And again, I just want to congratulate the team on the great work on getting grants on this project again and tying all these grants together so we can come out with a almost covered project. So that's wonderful. Nice job.
There's another motion?
There
Motion
is.
two?
I'm sorry,
Yes.
I missed that.
So I will make the motion to authorize administrator on advice of council to enter into an agreement with EOR in accordance with resolution 42122, scope of work and in the amount not to exceed $104,928.
Thank you
And
for
I will-
catching that, Manager Anderson. Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Okay, thank you, Manager Toves. Bobby, a roll call vote, please.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Baki.
Aye.
If
And
I can
motion-
just make, I'm sorry, Steve, if I can just make a note that I said resolution, it's really not, it's a scope of work dated 4/21/22. So if we can just have that corrected.
So motion passes with that suggested amendment. Okay, next topic is the BBSLC channel investigation scope of work. And we have one proposed motion on this topic, I believe.
Yes, Mr. President and managers. So we have currently a Clean Water Fund grant based off of prior diagnostic monitoring that includes a portion of the Bone to Little Comfort drainage area, and particularly this from School Lake down to Little Comfort. And we had, and also the drainage area south of Little Comfort. That's a combined clean water grant effort. And this right here is a scope from Interfluve. So both Blaine and I have had extensive experience working with them in the past, and so is EOR. So we reached out to them, given the challenges that we were encountering with working with the DNR. You may recall Blaine had proposed some beaver bafflers, or not they weren't bafflers, but some beaver structures, and that was not received to be an acceptable practice by the DNR. So we're looking to do a different kind of project in this area. So this is our recommended approach that we would like to take, or have them work with staff and EOR to develop a project design, or at least a concept that we could bring back for further discussion.
I just have one question for this project. Mr. President?
Yes, Manager Anderson, go ahead.
Thank you. I was just questioning why we wouldn't do a more thorough job of that first reach that's talked about. I know we're going to do an extensive one in section 2, but why not for section 1? Can you just address that, please?
You mean the section 1 as in the from Bone Lake down?
Yes.
Well, part of it was the previous work that we had already completed with EOR on that section from Lofton down to Manning. I don't know if there's any further thought. I mean, I guess we could inquire about them having a look at the H&H modeling work that EOR will be completing, and walk at least a section from the wetland down to see if there's anything, or just look at that stretch. That's the of interest.
Well, there might be a reason behind not doing it, but it just seems to me that if we're going to be doing work as part of the Comfort Lakes Management District focus the next couple of years, it would seem to be less expensive to have it done while they're out there instead of paying for them to come back again. And again, without knowing what the rationale was behind not doing them both the same, more intensive work. I would just like to know why. So
I think our principal reason was that the lower section, if you will, from School Lake to Little Comfort, we have been monitoring that, and again, based off the field assessment work from Blaine, that's the likely source of the majority of sediment going into Little Comfort. So that was, I guess, principally the reason we wanted to focus on this area. But I mean, we could certainly make an inquiry and discuss it internally and bring back an amendment if we feel it's appropriate.
Okay. I know if you look at the early maps before all the ditching took place, and you can see, what was connected and what wasn't connected, that finished map from the DNR color codes what's natural, what's man-made, and or altered, a natural altered stream. And so I would think it would be good to start from that basis and then look at those connections that have been man-made throughout that entire reach. So it's not separated into, two sections that haven't been touched. Both sections have been. So it's worth, I think, taking just another look to make sure we're not overlooking something.
I can add a little bit to the conversation. I know that our water quality monitoring data suggests that we've got relatively clean water leaving School Lake And then we've got another ISCO stream monitoring site at Itasca Avenue, and we see a change, an increase in phosphorus as it flows through an altered wetland complex on its way down to Little Comfort Lake. I think that was one of the reasons behind focusing on that lower reach for potential restoration action.
Now, is Birch Lake part of that lower reach?
It is not, no.
Okay. And so
So-
you haven't noticed any deterioration through the Birch Lake with pollutant loads, sediments?
Yep, I believe that data indicates that the water quality, although the chemistry of Birch Lake is more wetland-like. It's a very shallow lake. And I know another thing to consider is the potential work that we're investigating along the July Avenue tributary that flows in kind of between Birch and School Lake. There's a potential to reduce phosphorus load from a potential few projects that address some agricultural legacy type things up in that area as well. So I think we're looking at it at many parts of that entire drainage area. This is just one puzzle piece, so to speak, in that watershed.
Oh, that makes sense. So you've identified other smaller projects perhaps in that general area that will take care of whatever's coming through into Birch, is what it sounds like to me, right?
Yeah, we've got some investigations planned for the future where they're in the works right now.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. President, I have a question, Manager Baki.
Yes, go ahead, Dave.
So what we're approving here is simply a survey of the area from Bone Lake down to Little Comfort, correct? It's just a survey?
It's actually only from School Lake down.
It's a, if I could interject, it's a full assessment from Bone Lake down to Little Comfort Lake. However, it's more intensive from School Lake downstream. That's there'll be more ground surveys within that reach. There'll be drone flights throughout the entire area to look for problem issues, to get a sense of the area, and then some limited survey work, mainly at easily accessed areas from Bone Lake down to school. So road crossings, things of that nature. And then a more intensive survey walking the entire reach, walking or floating the entire reach from School Lake downstream to Little Comfort Lake. So more of a physical habitat survey within that area.
Is there a concern about restricted flowage? Is that part of the problem, or I'm not clear as to why this is being done?
So our water quality data indicates that we've got an increase of total suspended solids and phosphorus loading coming from the reach downstream of School Lake that flows into Little Comfort Lake. So we're trying to find potential solutions to reduce those nutrients and improve water quality in Little Comfort.
Okay.
So Blaine completed an assessment, field assessment, maybe a couple of years ago or a year and a half ago or so. And so that stretch, as he noted, largely wetland complex, a lot of unconsolidated material that's easily transported, especially during runoff events or higher flows. And so that's really looking at, how can we, stabilize or looks like there's some opportunities in there to do something to address that. And that's really what we're after. So.
I
guess the point I'd like to make is that, due to the drought last year, Bone Lake was significantly lower, and I know the stop blocks have been pulled, and it's my understanding they will not be put back in at that outlet. I just want to mention here that there is a concern that if we're doing anything that would impact the water level of Bone Lake, that would be a concern.
Yeah, it would not. We would not change the control for Bone Lake is the culvert at Lofton. That's always been the case. Yes, we have, with those stop logs, that was a design that we attempted to use, but We've, of course, as you know, modified that structure so it can be passive and requires no controls. And now again, the culvert alone controls the elevation on Bone Lake. That being said, the one caveat is if there's would be a very large amount of material, pushing up against the grates. But given the design where it now comes out, there's more surface area. So the probability of it being plugged is far less.
Any other questions?
Just a comment. I think maybe this will help Manager Baki understand what's going on in that section. To me, it's equivalent to Moody Lake's impact on Bone. And we've got agricultural areas primarily in that Birch to School Lake area. So there's been a lot of historical agricultural pressure in that area, carrying all of that down to Little Comfort, which eventually, of course, ends up part of it into Big Comfort and the Sunrise. So to me, it's equivalent to that connection, like I said, between Moody and Bone, and so that's what this is. And it's not ever the intention of the district to do one project that harms a previous project or any other lake body. We're trying to stop that type of thing from happening. So so it was a good question, but hopefully that helps understand it a little bit better, and maybe putting it in that context when we talk to the Bone Lake Association folks, they'll understand it a little bit better too.
Thank you, Manager Anderson. That does clarify it.
I'd like to kind of jump on your bandwagon though, Dave, because in almost all the projects we do, we start off with some kind of a well-identified problem that we're trying to understand how to solve it. And that usually comes through diagnostic monitoring, et cetera, et cetera. Like you've expressed when you first started talking, where is the problem here? I mean, I don't see any target goals in pounds of sediment or pounds of phosphorus that we're trying to remove. In fact, we started working in this area in 2015 when Dr. Funke came on board. We did all kinds of diagnostic studying up and down the stream. And then Blaine did a lot more later on. And so we should have some numbers that should be relatively attractive or not attractive. And I just don't want to make sure we don't start down a path working on something that doesn't have a very high payoff, especially if it hasn't been shown from previous research, because all of our effort on Comfort and Little Comfort are on the west side and the south side of those lakes. And we've got big projects going there because the numbers are big. And that's what drew us over there. We kind of ignored this area because if I recall correctly, it's not that big of a problem. And if we're going to go in and start rearranging streams and that and put bends and stuff and so forth, that's what the goal is. We take the big risk of breaking a lot of sediment loose that could flow into the lake. So all I'm asking, and I dropped Mike a note on this, can we better quantify what we're going after here? Because I don't really see what the problem is from the past research that we've done. It hasn't popped its head up like it normally does in other projects. We mentioned there's some phosphorus indicators, but nobody's got any quantification of that. And I just want to be sure that we use our money wisely in terms of where we spend it. We can't cover every area. And there's certainly a lot of areas of Forest Lake that haven't been looked at because the initial assessment said that it's not worth looking at. So I just wanted to bring that point to the board and something we should think about.
Well, if I could just respond to that. There have been a number of studies that have pointed to the contribution that Little Comfort is contributing to Big Comfort and the Sunrise. And the actual load numbers from Little Comfort are higher than what we're getting from Forest Lake. And that's been in past studies. So the most recent one was that culvert on Heath Avenue and Highway 8. I think the number was 374 pounds per year of phosphorus coming into Little Comfort in that particular singular culvert. So there is identified work. The Bone Lake, excuse me, the School Lake and Birch Lake stream has been on the MPCA impaired list for years.
For
And so
bacteria.
there's a lot of things going on. And so it's clearly has a problem. And that's why we did the paleo core. I think it was in School Lake. It was on that bottom reach of that stream coming in. So there
Right.
are identified problems. It's not,
Well,
you know, a piñata that we're hitting at. We've already got indicators that there's a problem.
well, why can't we bring those numbers forward like we've done in all the other projects? I'd be
Okay.
happy then to give you my support on that if we could see what the potential payoff is. Regardless of where it comes from or where it is, if there's enough there to go after it, let's go after it. But the fact that it's not here, and traditionally it has been, is a concern to me.
Yes, Mr. President, yes, you did, you did mention it to me. So I've just posted our piece in the chat for this particular project. And I noticed that our reduction per the diagnostic study is 60 pounds, but this particular stretch from School to Little Comfort is 50 pounds. And so this was part of a Clean Water Fund grant. There's several components to it. This is one of them. We really have 3 phases. We're going to do this, the Heath Avenue East Wetland piece, but we're also looking to do School Lake to Little Comfort, and then an internal load treatment for Little Comfort after the completion of that. So again, we thought we were going to be more straightforward with the School to Little Comfort based off of the assessment work that Blaine had done, but the DNR is not allowing those beaver structures to be placed in there. So as an alternative, with some discussion, we felt that Interflu would be the best to be able to come in and provide a recommended solution. As you can imagine, over previous years, this drainage area, you would see a lot of organic matter being discharged. It's especially in higher flows in that wetland area, then would potentially deposit it, but then it can be resuspended and discharged farther downstream. And that's really the legacy of a lot of early agriculture when Europeans came in and plowed everything in the sediment. That organic matter was easily transportable. I've been on farms where they've done some excavation and have found an old wooden axle, some 8 feet below topsoil in the bottom of the valleys in this coulee area. You're familiar as a trout fisherman, you'll see in these locations. So I think this is kind of what we're seeing here in this wetland complex, is that there's been a large amount of that over the years has been deposited now during higher flow events, is getting resuspended and discharging farther downstream. So the goal is, we have a goal for a 50-pound reduction for the stretch. And I apologize again that I did not include more details in the memo on that particular element.
You've trained us too well. You've trained us too well, Mike. That's why I was a little concerned about it. So that's fine. If we've got it, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure we had it, because there's too many other areas we could spend money on. So
that memo that you just pulled up, oh, here it is. It's coming up again. The total in that whole area is 184 pounds per year. We just approved a big project on JD6 that was for, was it
87?
Yeah, 87. So half of what this is. So,
right. But there was 87 in that project and there was nothing in this project. So now we have 184, I'm on board.
Okay.
So.
Well,
Mr. President?
Yeah, Dave, go ahead.
I guess it makes sense to me too, that this is a survey and assessment to gather more data. And since I've been on board, and even before, the goal was to start in the north end of the watershed district and work down towards the other lakes. And this is part of that. So it makes sense to me as to why this is being done.
Sounds like we're all in agreement. So let's move ahead on it then.
All right. I will make this motion to authorize administrator on advice of council to enter into an agreement with Interfluve in accordance with the 4/15/2022 scope of work. And
I will
authorize tasks 1 to 5 in that scope of work not to exceed 30,000.
And I'll
I will
second that.
second that.
Okay, seconded by, was it Dave?
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
Yes.
second by Dave then. Bobby, roll call vote. Thank you.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Loth,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Baki.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Good. Next to old business. The 2021 year in review, annual report and progress report, and we have to accept these, I believe.
Approve these.
Approve them, yes,
Yeah,
approve
these
them.
are staff
Yep.
reports. So Emily is
Right.
available to answer any further questions. Otherwise, I'll just thank again Emily and the other staff that have contributed to the development of these documents, Jessica and Blaine and others as well. So
I will make the motion to approve and accept the 2021 year in review, annual report and progress report.
And I will second that.
Okay, move and second it. Bobby, a roll call vote.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Loth,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Baki.
Aye. And I'd like to add that I also would like to recognize the good work the staff did on this annual report. I think it's a real good educational tool for anyone who would take the time to read through it. It's lots of
Yeah.
good information in there.
I agree.
Great work, staff. Thank you. Next topic is public relations and communications plan.
Mr. President, managers, Jessica is online here with the meeting now too to help answer any questions. So thank you, Emily. Have a good rest of the evening. So as written in the memo, our RFP really did not produce the outcome that we had hoped for. And so in conversation with staff, we've put together this recommendation for a path forward. And we would like to discuss with the board some next steps if this is acceptable.
Well, Mr. President, I agree with the conclusion here. It's disappointing that we didn't get more input from professionals or feedback, but or responses, any of the above. It's disappointing, but what can you do? You got to move on, and we still need to put a plan together to help us get the story of the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District out to our members, our citizen members. So this seems like a good way to go. I would just like to offer my assistance in any way that I can. I have a background in this, and so I'm ready to help whenever I'm called upon.
And Mr. President?
Yes.
I think if the staff has the bandwidth to take a crack at this, I would sure support that effort as well.
Okay, thank you, Manager Tiz. Anybody else? Any other comments?
Mr. President, is
Yes, Dave?
Jessica available? Is Jessica with us tonight?
Yeah, she's here.
Could we hear from Jessica and just kind of give us some feedback and ideas as to what your thoughts are regarding this?
Sure. Yeah, so like it says in the memo and like Manager Anderson commented, it was pretty disappointing to see the outcome of that RFP. However, while that RFP was out, I spent a lot of time reviewing the plans that other watersheds had recently redone. And both Capital Region and Minnehaha Creek have recently redone their plans, and they are much more robust and inclusive of all these different elements that, you know, weren't even addressed in our 2015 one. And I think there's a lot of information in there that's applicable to our district. And I think similar to what we did with the watershed management plan is we can learn from what other watershed districts have done and really build that initial scaffolding for the plan. And then when we really need to get some of that hard data in terms of demographics, community makeup, community opinions, different things like that, then that would be a great time to really bring in a professional firm like we did with the watershed management plan to have some of those interactive working sessions with the public to help fill in those district specific needs and really drill down on some of those goals that we have already identified in the watershed management plan. So I think we can get our plan pretty far, especially this year, since we don't have any specific dollar amount budgeted into the 2022 budget for this. I think staff can do this in-house, get it pretty far, and then just be ready to rock in 2023.
Thank you, Jessica. That's very helpful. I'm very supportive of that work as well.
We also have the possibility as we move forward with our office visioning project that we had talked about hiring a firm that can provide some leadership there, not only in what we should settle on, but how then to sell that to the public in terms of getting support for it. So that's another area of communication outside to the public, which we'll have a professional helping us with. So between those two efforts, I think we can make some pretty good progress. So do we need to make a decision or do anything tonight on this, or just approve the direction that we just talked about?
Yeah, I
just
think consensus action is probably fine. I agree with it.
Okay. How does everybody else feel? Chris?
I agree.
I'm fine with it. I just had a quick question. So I think in the memo, it talked that one of the firms that had inquired about questions pertaining to the RFP decided to not bid because we didn't have a budget. I'm just wondering if the other the watershed that they currently work with and the other one that Jessica had spoken to, when they went out for bid or request for proposals, do we have an understanding of where they were at in this development of the PR and communications plan? And is that, I guess, what we're trying to get to? I don't know if that's a good question or not.
I can address, I did talk to both of those watershed districts to try to get an idea of what they spent with their consultant to get their plan to its final stages. Both of them did include budgets, or I should say not to exceed amounts in their RFP in the ranges of 50,000 to 65,000. And both of those said that's right where the dollar amount came out at. I'm not sure if that addresses your question, or both of those districts do, however, I will mention, have significantly larger staff capacity. They have multiple education and outreach staff members on their team. So I'm assuming that also included a significant amount of internal lift from their staff in partnership with the consultants.
So is that kind of what the process that we're trying to mimic, so to speak, where we're doing stuff in-house as they did, even though we don't have equal size of, it's only one of you. You're indicating that those other watersheds have multiple people that are involved with, community outreach.
Right. So a couple things that I think will help us get to that same point, despite being a smaller staff, is one, we already have several goals identified for education and outreach and communications in our watershed management plan that we just established. So we don't have to go quite that in depth to start with. And then we can also work with a lot of the material that they have already developed for their plans. So we're not starting from scratch in that sense. I think what we'll really need to be pulling on external assistance for is going to be that specific demographics, community opinions, things that are really specific to our district. If that makes sense, I don't
It
know
does.
if I'm,
It's
if I'm Mhm.
It does make sense. The whole, I'm just trying to understand the more broad concept and kind of path moving forward. I thought the RFP was fine. I had just, when we had looked at it, I had thought that a little more detail would have been good in it. If these other watersheds have larger staff to dedicate to the in-house work, yet they reached out to a firm to kind of take over the entire project. If we're short-staffed, wouldn't it make more sense that we would rely heavier on an outside firm? Or am I not thinking about this correctly?
I think it would if we didn't have the ability to rely on the work that these other watershed districts have already done. So we're going to be relying heavily on the base that they have already laid out in their new plans, rather than, you know, trying to reinvent the wheel and completely start from scratch with a firm. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, is that we have a smaller staff, but we're not starting in the same place as they are, kind of being the real leaders in what these new plans will look like. We're
Sure.
going to be able to use them as an example and use our brand new watershed management plan to kind of mesh that all together to get us at a good starting point, so that when we're ready for a consultant to come in, we can have a really specific RFP and an idea of a budget in mind ready to go, so that we can hopefully really get some good proposals coming in.
So it's not like we're going to get it to a spot and then reach out to a professional to kind of carry it forward. It's kind of like we're going to do it in-house, and then when a need arises, that small piece will go out to bid while the entire plan continues to develop. Does that make sense?
That's what staff has been discussing. Yes, we're gonna, as we develop it, we'll really be able to identify those gaps that we don't have the ability to fill, and being able to work with Manager Anderson in identifying what those gaps are and where we can really use that additional assistance. And then that's when we would pull in that consultant.
So there might be multiple RFPs along the process for various tasks that we feel outside help is needed for.
Potentially, I'm really not sure on that. It's hard to say until we really start digging into the foundations of the plan.
Sure. I think you've answered enough of my questions. Thank you.
Managers, I'll note also a couple of things. One is I hope to have somebody as Nick's replacement fairly soon. We've completed a couple of interviews, and this individual would have some skills to help support this effort. So that's kind of a positive in that realm. And the other is that we can, I think, readily see the value of this approach from the way that we've done our watershed management plan. We often see those bigger plans done by outside firms. I mean, a lot of consulting firms, it's kind of their bread and butter in a lot of ways for, these one watershed, one plans, or they're pulling in $180,000, $200,000 plus to do these plans. But really then it's really not owned locally and by the staff, but this, in our case where we did the watershed management plan, largely in-house, and we had the technical components done by our engineer. If there's ever a question, they know exactly where they built it. So, they were able to access it and provide a lot more value over time through that knowledge. So I think when we talked about it internally here before bringing it to the board, I think that's, to me, one of the greatest values that we'll get out of this approach. So I think it's working out.
So besides the watershed plan, the one watershed development and this, just in recent history, are there other things that, you know, Comfort Lake, Forest Lake Watershed District has relied upon other districts' work to kind of help with our development? I'm just wondering how that, what other types of applications where, you know, kind of utilizing some of the work that another watershed might have done to kind of help us in our own development of that. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I think, you know, where it makes sense, we'll try to pull in from others. And, but at the same time, in certain areas, we tend to be leaders. So it's really a matter of, you know, which kind of a piece. But a lot of the things we're talking about, you know, we can pull in from others. And I'm sure Jessica has some examples of that as well.
Yeah, I think one recent example that's still pretty applicable is when all of the watershed districts and local government units had to, out of the blue, create a COVID-19 preparedness plan that had all of these special elements and things like that. Our district, we partnered with Rice Creek, take a look at what they had implemented, how much applies to us, what we can change, talked with a couple other watershed districts. It's definitely not something that's new to us. Most of our staff members are actually in different groups with staff from other watershed districts, kind of constantly exchanging ideas and plans. And even broader than that, I'm part of the League of Minnesota Cities Public Communicators Group. So any questions that come up, any plans that are being developed, everybody kind of posts that out on a big message board. So all the communicators in the state can take a look at those and share with each other and draw information. So I definitely wouldn't say it's something that we are unfamiliar with doing.
Nice to hear examples of collaboration in that area.
I think the other big area of collaboration that I would just toss some credit to would be permitting. They do a ton of work to coordinate with other watershed districts to try to make our processes better, their processes better, make life for permittees better. I think they really do the most in collaboration. So I'll throw some credit their way.
Mhm.
Thank
I'm glad you brought that up because that's another, like you said, a big area that there's a lot of cooperation and sharing. But the watershed community is like that throughout the state. I mean, you want to help out other watersheds as much as you can.
Of course. It's just nice to see specific examples as a new manager about how
Yep.
that actually works versus the general thought that people like to help each other out.
I can add one more piece to that. Actually, there's a Minnesota Association of Watershed Administrators, of course, MAWA. And so there's the recognizing that there was this continuous need of information sharing. They've created their own SharePoint site so people can simply upload documents or then conversely go and grab them and make drafts, because in the early years we were often struggling to, hey, I need this thing for, you know, to meet some requirement, or I want to start this program, what does it look like? And so it was a lot more stumbling, but we continued to work on that part of it, and that's the one new mechanism that we have.
Okay,
Thank
it
you.
sounds like we're moving in the right direction here, and the board is supportive of it. So let's just continue to move forward with helping Jessica as we can. Any other comments? Well, otherwise we'll move on. Everybody okay with that?
Mhm.
Okay, let's move on then to the last item for old business, the Shields Lake Carp Removal Program, and the need to transfer some money to cover that cost of that program. Is Garrett gonna cover
Managers, I
this?
think, yeah, Blaine covered it already, or excuse me, Garrett.
Garrett, yep.
And I'll have to admit, I bristled a little bit when he suggested to me that we were going to try this again with WSB, but after he gave me the price, and then even if after the first time it doesn't if it's such a poor turnout, we could just cancel it. I thought it was worth a try.
Is the idea of doing it in the spring versus the fall something that they have kind of figured out since 2019, or why wasn't that recommendation made then?
You know, it's a little bit surprising too, because I mean, we know that for carp, their preferred temperature range for moving for when they're in the offspring area is going to be between 60 and 65 degrees. So, I mean, that's springtime. That's when they're the most active and probably most susceptible to some predation of you know, this kind, whether by bow fishing or others. So it seemed like that was pretty common knowledge and right. I mean, I wasn't out there, and, you know, I guess we'd like to think that they're the professionals that know how to do this stuff, but I hope we're more successful this round.
Okay, we have two motions here. Are there any other questions or comments that want to be made before we try to move to a motion? If not, we need a motion to authorize a budget transfer of $3,000 from the AIS management line to the Shield Lake Common Carp management line.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, thanks, Chris. We need a second.
I'll second that, Manager Baki.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Bobby, please do a roll call vote.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Baki.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. The second motion is to authorize your administrator under the advice of council to enter into an agreement with WSB for the removal of common carp on Shields Lake as described in their 2022 proposal.
I
I'll
will
also
make
make
that
that
motion
motion.
as stated.
Okay, thank you, Doug. And
I'll
a second. Okay, Chris seconds. Thank you. Bobby, roll call vote.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Baki.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. So now moving on to report of staff. Mike, administrators report.
Spreaders and managers, I'll probably note something in next month's packet as well, but yesterday I met with the executive director for the Lessard Sam Outdoor Heritage Fund, Mark Johnson. He happens to live in Chisago County, just a few miles outside of the watershed district. We met at the MOD legislative session after our evening programs. So he offered to come and meet with myself and staff. So Emily and I met, went over some areas and kind of where we're going with the district. And we also shared the progress report, and he was very impressed. And I was impressed at how much of it he read, because he was able to refer to so many pieces of it during our conversation. It lasted about an hour and a half. So that was a real good piece. And because if you will maybe know from the legacy amendment, there's largely two large pools. One is for the clean water, and then the other is for land and legacy, and then a smaller amount for the arts and trails and things like that. So they have a fairly large pool of grant dollars, and these are typically larger funds, even though we got our smaller grant applications can be submitted through the DNR, and and we got that Cranberry Lake Channel property through that particular mechanism, but anything that's $500,000 and more, we would submit through this grant application. And it's a longer process because it goes through the legislature. But it was a very good meeting. So.
Sounds very encouraging. So is there anything we have to do to facilitate that, Mike?
No, it's just, part of my basic, what it took me a while to figure it out, but when it comes to grants, the best thing is just to meet with the people to understand what they want to, their objective is to hand out the money. So is to figure out all the key elements of how to do that. So we'll work on it and see when we're ready for that submission, but it's something that we've been kind of eyeing on for this last year or so anyway, but we got a lot of good information out of that meeting with them.
Good, great effort. Any other questions for Mike? Okay,
Is
if
this
not,
on his-
move- Go
is this-
ahead, Manager Anderson.
This is the administrator report we're still on?
Yes.
Okay, I just have a couple. On page 3, under technical resources, there's a mention about the Met Council draft priorities waters list. And we were sent out a survey, apparently it's optional to do, but did staff participate in that, Mike?
Yes, we did.
Okay, good. And what is this new program? Can you just condense it for us? And how is it different than the MPCA's list?
Well, I think if you were to look at it, I mean, the Met Council is really their own, obviously their own government entity, and trying to shape. They have not done this for some prior years. Apparently, their initial version came out in 1982, and with almost 1,000 lakes, rivers, in the area. I'm not sure if it really impacts their programs or if it's just a, taking, if you will, just like we're proposing with our outreach or public relations side is to get input from the community about things that they should be prioritizing.
Okay, you haven't heard if it's some mechanism to bring more dollars down to the people managing these lakes?
Well, I think, I mean, yes, there's the simple description is that it will help inform staff to distribute their funds and resources to these priority lakes.
Okay, so there might be some funding built behind that program eventually, it sounds like. Good. Was it?
Anything else, Manager Anderson?
Nope, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then moving on to EOR report. Celio or Greg, who's going to cover that?
I'll cover that, Mr. President.
Okay,
Managers. Yeah, so obviously we got a lot of projects going. I think you guys have gotten a lot of updates just through the last few board meetings on some of those active construction projects. Maybe a couple other things just to highlight. Like I mentioned, I'll be meeting with the City of Forest Lake tomorrow. We'll be talking about their surveying efforts on their stormwater infrastructure. We'll be talking about the North Shore Circle project a bit and whether we can convince the contractor to maybe add on a bit of work to clean up all the dumping that's been occurring along the wetland area. And then we'll also be talking about kind of status of their kind of regional treatment planning and implementation of that. And then also if there's any BMPs for future road projects. So full agenda. Good that we're meeting occasionally to discuss those things. Another maybe highlight on a project we haven't talked about in a while is that Forest Lake in-lake study. Our crews did get out right before the ice went out and collected cores on all 3 basins, and those have been sent into the lab for testing. That'll take us a little while to get that data back, but the idea is to determine which, if any of those basins would be candidates for alum treatment and or looking for other in-lake practices as necessary. So that's moving along. I think I'll just leave it at that, but if folks have particular questions about their favorite project, I'd be happy to answer those.
Any questions? I have one comment, Greg, in terms of trying to get the contractor to remove some of all that debris that's in that wetland. Would it help if the Lake Association drafted some support to the city? I just want your, I don't want to do something that's going to hurt us. And so I would appreciate your and Mike's comment on that fact, because we could very easily get people to write and actually come up as a Lake Association supporting that project, because we put signs in there now. We've been moving in the right direction. If we're going to do the work, you might as well finalize it and get it all cleaned out. So our thought.
Yeah, I think the city is in a position of support. It's more, I think, a matter of kind of inquiring with the contractor whether they'd be willing to do that extra work and then getting a quote as to what the dollar value would be on that. And, just as FYI, the city's already, I think, 400,000 over budget on the overall project. So they'd definitely be looking to the district to pay for that extra work. But I don't know what the number is. So we kind of need to go down this path and see.
Is there any way, obviously we're going to pay for it, but is there any way that if the contractor doesn't want to do the work and that's reflected in his price, that we could have a second contractor come in and do that part of the work for us?
Yeah, I think if the price isn't favorable, we could reach out to maybe some landscaping contractors. I think the nice thing about having it part of the city project is I don't think they would run into maybe oppositions or complications with doing that work in the right of way. Whereas if the watershed does it themselves, I think
you'd be falling over each other. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so I think we should go down this route first, but if the contractor is not willing to do it or the prices just seem unreasonable, then I think we'll just explore different avenues.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Greg? Okay, if not, moving on to Smith Partners. Chuck, are you still with us?
No, Mr. Holtman has left us for the evening.
That's right, he left it to 8:00. Okay, moving on then, the report of the treasurer. Jackie.
Yep. We have bills to pay of $194,485.51. So that will be part of the motion. Just to take you to, this is page 4 now of the report for this past month. We have about, at this, I just checked today, it's about 1.2 million in the savings account. So we've got enough to get us through until our tax payment comes in early July. If you look at the front page of the budget summary, that shows that we've expended 35% of our budget to date. So we're fairly close to being on track there. So we're in good shape, and we're watching, obviously, the accounts as we get closer to that July 1st date. So we always, for the new members, this always happens. We have to get by until that next or that first check payment of the following year after budgeting comes in. So the first 6 months, we try to keep that cushion, as the auditor talked about, so that we're not too tight. And it looks like we're going to be tight, but not too tight by the time that check comes in. So we're looking good. So I will make the motion to pay the bills and accept the treasurer's report.
I'll second that motion. Bobby, would you please do a roll call vote?
Mr. President, I have a quick question.
Yes,
Where
Dave?
is the mini storage located that we're paying for? I'm just curious.
I can answer that question. The Forest, so we rent mini storage units right in Forest Lake from Hallberg Marine. They're right where you would get onto Highway 8. They're right on the other side of 61.
Thank you. And then who does the printing for us?
Rapid Press Printing in Forest Lake for about 90% of things. Anything that is a little bit out of their scope is typically whoever we can find, but they do most of it.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, Bobby, proceed with the roll call vote.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Baki.
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries. Thank you.
I'd like to
any
give just a little, I'd like to give just a follow-up update. Won't take too long. I've been working with Nancy on reformatting our reports as we've talked about. And I see that Ted Hansen has joined us on our list. Are you still there, Ted?
I am.
Okay, good, good. So once Nancy gets a draft, I want to run that by you, Ted, and then we will present it to the board just for comments before we implement it. And turns out that they have a template already that was pretty close to what I had shown Nancy, and it came from Rice Creek. It's the way that they do their financials. So she didn't have to build another template. So that's good. Just a few little tweaks for us, but it's going to be a lot easier to follow.
Good, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, report of officers and managers. Jackie, start with you.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is that the Comfort Lake Association did receive the all lake permit to treat Eurasian water milfoil. And so we've got a request out to meet with Mike and Garrett just to help understand what the district is already doing in the monitoring program. Some of those reports will be necessary for turning into the DNR. And so hopefully we can get that scheduled next week, but we're all very excited to get this program going. There aren't many of these permits issued every year. And so we feel very fortunate to have received that. And we'll keep you posted.
Good. Chris, anything?
I just wanted to thank Mike for coming and speaking at the Lake Association meeting last Wednesday, and for Jackie for coming to attend. I don't think we had quite the audience we were hoping to, but I think it was good content.
Thank you. Doug?
Just to say that Blaine did a real nice job of representing the watershed at the Chisago Township meetings last week. Nice to hear him reporting on our issues there. And if you need somebody to sign checks, I can come in tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Dave?
I want to thank Doug for coming in to sign the checks. I just also like to mention that we're lucky to have ice out on Bone Lake, and I'm sure you are on your lakes as well. I have a cabin up at Lake Vermilion, 20 miles from the Canadian border, and they still got nearly 2 feet of ice up there. So they're
Oh my
hoping
gosh.
for ice off the lake for the fishing opener. I don't know if that'll happen, but we're lucky to be here.
Thank you. And I have no comments this evening. So that leads us to adjournment. Is there any other comments or thoughts before we adjourn? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, and we'll be adjourning at 8:34, which is a little ahead of schedule for a change. Thank you.
Do we have any board direction, or are we skipping that?
Oops, we do have board direction, don't we? Yes, Chuck is not here.
Mr. President, managers, Emily and myself were taking notes on Chuck's behalf. We only recorded one board direction, which was that Greg will investigate how wastewater is handled for permit 22006 and discuss with the city of Forest Lake.
Good, thank you. Any additions to that list? Okay, hearing none, we'll accept that list as the board direction. And now we can look for entertaining a motion for adjournment.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. Second? I'll
I'll
second.
second that.
Okay, Bobby, roll call vote, please. Maybe Bobby left early.
Yeah, maybe.
No, no, I'm here. No, no.
Okay.
Just before we adjourn, I'd like to discuss signing of checks. Doug had messaged me and said he could be into the office tomorrow to meet me from 10 to 11. So Jackie will have to be after that. Does that work for you, Jackie?
Sure.
Okay, perfect. Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Loth,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Baki.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries, meeting's adjourned. Thank you all for your active participation tonight. We've really moved through the agenda quickly today.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay,
Night.
Yep.
good night, everyone. Thank you.